psychological safety and what lies hidden underneath. Here to talk about it, please welcome Małgorzata Wypych, CEO, Mental Health Center. Welcome, Małgorzata.
Welcome.
We have Katrin Terwiel, Vice President, Diversity and Global Talent at Deutsche Telekom, joining us for the discussion. Hello, Katrin.
Hi. Great to be here.
Good to have you with us. And last but not least, Alicja, Zarzycka, Employer Branding Country Manager, Volvo Group in Poland. Hello, Alicja.
Hello.
Hi. Our today's discussion is really about the importance of mental health support and responsibility culture in organizations. There are no shortcuts here. So I believe we are past the time when organizing a well-being event or two really addresses your issues. So let's start with better understanding what is psychological safety and what areas and approaches to this topic you represent from your individual perspective. Whoever would like to start, the floor is yours.
Katrin, maybe you will start.
Happy to do so. So for me, it's maybe even more than mental well-being or talking about mental well-being, but rather an atmosphere where people can be their true selves at work and express themselves without the fear of being embarrassed or being punished somehow, so that they can talk about mistakes, that they can express their needs, that they can express who they are and what they need to be at their best at the workplace. So, and it's also being seen or feeling seen as who you are and being recognized as such. And of course, that has very high implications on diversity and inclusion, but also on mental health, because that's both things that are very personal. So people need to feel safe to talk about them.
Thank you very much, Katrin. Alicja, can we go to you and perhaps mention specific examples from your perspective or your outlook on psychological safety?
Mm-hmm. For me, there are like two main aspects, themes that pop up immediately when I think about psychological safety. One is mental health, and the other one is growth and development. When it comes to mental health, so imagine you're working in an organization where your voice is not heard and you are not able to express yourself. You feel shamed by a boss, by a colleague, when you've expressed an original thought, let's say. So lack of psychological safety can affect your mental health. Not being able to express yourself can lead you to shutting down, denying your best self. Feeling ashamed by a boss, by a colleague, can sink your self-esteem and can lead you just to feeling bad about yourself, about your abilities, your competencies. Your quality of life can be affected if you spend, let's say, 8 hours a day at work, every day, not feeling appreciated or valued. When you are under stress, chronic stress most of the time, you will not be able to think clearly, and this may affect your emotional ability to do your job. Basically, it becomes too exhausting to deal with the toxic work environment. So mental health is affected when you experience lack of psychological safety. So the other aspect that I mentioned, growth and development, because this is somehow associated with it. It's like learning at work starts with psychological safety. So it's the kind of like a principal building block in what's called a learning organization. One that embraces employee growth and sees the learning process is much more than a formal traditional training. So many surveys and research have shown, and we follow that at Volvo as well, approximately 70% of learning occurs through experience, practice on the job, 20 through other people, conversations, networking, asking questions, and 10% only just through formal training. So psychological safety in that way can lead to personal growth and development. People, when they feel safe, they can learn and explore freely through discovery, feedback, and engagement.
Hard to disagree, but I'm sure we'll all agree that if your organization wants to shut you down for expressing an original thought, as you put it, the safe thing to do and the right thing to do is to say goodbye to this organization as soon as you can, I suppose. Gosha,
Yes.
what's your perspective?
Yeah, in fact, when I'm listening to ladies, I think that I will not have anything new to say, but maybe I will add a few informations, because I would put this psychological safety also under the self-expression or feeling authentic at job term. And just to share something more specific, I used to do some research about a sense of authenticity at work. And I check whether it correlates with emotional engagement and counterproductive behaviors at work. So what happened in my research, what I found, that there are three main factors that can lead to this free self-expression or feeling more authentic at work. And first factor was to fit to your job, to your position, to fit to your team, to fit to the values of the organization. So it's first factor that allows people to be their more true self, to show true self within team or organization. Second factor was to feel free to express what you really think, to express your judgment, your opinions within the team, but also to be free to express negative feelings like anger, or to admit that I feel low. So those flaws that we have, if we can express them within the team and we feel accepted, we are not afraid of rejection. That is the second factor that leads to this sensation, to this feeling of authenticity. But the strongest factor that is shown not only in my research but also in other data is that specific and very important is this relation with your supervisor. If you can express your thoughts, opinions, give ideas without being shamed for this or rejected, and also if you can express your negative emotions toward your supervisor, so you may say, I'm angry of what you're doing, it also gives people a lot of security. So those three factors, fit to your job, fit to your team, and the lack of fear of rejection in relation with your supervisor are crucial, and they strongly correlate with emotional engagement. And also what I found in my research, that people who are low in this feeling of authenticity, they create counterproductive behaviors. So they gossip in a negative way about the company. Sometimes they steal, office stuff. Sometimes they are causing conflicts. So it's not only about mental health, but on the other, extreme, there are also very negative behaviors if we don't provide this secure environment for our employees.
That's a very interesting angle to our discussion, Małgorzata. Can we talk about perhaps beliefs and competencies that employees should have, maybe, to support this process of creating a psychologically safe environment?
Katrin,
Any
maybe you
volunteers?
The beliefs that employees need to have, or what employees can do. I think for example, the so-called failure culture. But how do we, for example, treat things that didn't work, or things that really went super wrong? So if we talk about them very early, maybe even before they happen, and address, I think I am not going to handle this, I think it's too much, it might go in the wrong direction. This is very, very helpful, of course, to address things very early and to make it normal to learn, to fail, to try out. So bringing one example, handling health data, for example, is of course super critical, and data breaches can lead to very high punishments. But if something happens in data security, you always need to bring yourself to the compliance department, right? You need to file a complaint against yourself, and then even from the authorities, it's not as punished. It's rather, this is what you need to do. It can happen that data breaches happen, but then what a responsible behavior is to directly address it, to follow up who needs information about the data breach, what can we do to limit it, and so forth. The real crime is not doing anything and trying to hide it. So this is, I think, a mindset that is also important for employees to have or to learn, that addressing things very early is super important, and it's not something to hide. And hiding is the unprofessional.
Katrin, speaking of important, do you think, perhaps it goes without saying, but do you think psychological safety is especially important now after the past 2 years?
Yeah, and why is that? I think it's less favored and less possible to control each other, for example. So people in hybrid models, for example, work more or less alone a lot of the time. So if we don't share what's not working, you can't see it. As a manager, for example, I find it particularly hard that I don't have my team around me and can't see things like, oh God, or, I'm super stressed and working super late. So you wouldn't notice it. And then people use the sending function of emails, so you wouldn't even see that somebody's working late. So especially there, it's super important that we share. It's very much easy to just see people in this box here and not notice that, I don't know, they have their depressed partner lying in the bed next to them, or, you know what I mean? So it's especially important to speak about what's not working, or what we need, and also because mental health issues are on the rise. So I think those are two factors that make it even more important at
the moment. What you're saying, Katrin, is essentially that the roots towards our better understanding where we stand on psychological safety as organizations have changed. So to achieve the same goals of better understanding, you just need to follow different paths now. At the same time, careful when you use the word control, because psychological safety and control do not necessarily go together. I'm sure Gosia will agree on that.
That's why I say it's not one to...
I wouldn't agree to that.
Can we discuss...
Yes. Can I add something to what you asked about? Because Katrin mentioned this example of so-called no-blame culture. So we are more focused on what we do, not who did the mistake, for example. And but by saying control, we are afraid of this word, and many people, those who are very high in the need of being, self-dependent, they may hear control as something bad. But if we dig into more detailed traits or beliefs that we should build within people to have psychological safety, it would be, for example, non-judgmental attitude. So we need to really self-observe and to catch those thoughts that are judgmental, to withdraw from our judgments, just to be more open to what people say, and without this judgment. Another thing that we need to develop is a stronger self-esteem, or in other words, maybe lower our fear of rejection. So if we have more employees who are emotionally stable, they're not so afraid of being judged, or they're not afraid of being rejected. If someone controls them, they will not feel anxiety. So in fact, what Katrin said, and how I understand that, is that if we are observed, if we are in the office and someone can catch our mistake, without blaming us, without judgment, we can also feel more secure, because I'm not the only one who is responsible for self-observation and controlling data, for example. So I think that it might be different with this control. And also what Katrin said, that nowadays when we don't see each other on everyday basis, what can give us more security is that we can share about those anxieties and etc. So assertiveness, it's also one of those traits that can be built to rise psychological safety in organization.
Can we now go to Alicja and Katrin for perhaps somewhat more actionable steps within the organization? So what steps can organizations undertake to build and strengthen psychological safety, and who is responsible? Because at the end of the day, we always have the accountability question, don't we? Alicja, can we start with you?
Sure. So it has been already said and mentioned. It starts with creating a no blame culture, and when we already said that when an organization has a blame culture, employees will not be able to feel safe or secure in their role. And in certain industries, and like production, for example, our operations in Poland are very diverse. But in Wrocław, we have a bus production plant. So, and being able to admit, to report failures, errors is essential for both the business, but also it's critical for health and safety, not only ours, but also of all our clients using our products. So it starts with building it starts with building psychological safety between the individual team members on a team, let's say, even if they represent different functional areas, roles, seniority levels, let's say. But everyone wants to feel safe while at work. But safety won't stick when it only exists just between team members. I think this belief was the basis for us at Volvo to establish this active care culture. This is how we framed it. This is how we called it. So it's one, and we are very proud of that. It's built on those three components that are crucial also for psychological safety. So take care of myself. So being an example for my colleagues, and doing your part in the process, let's say. Take care of others, so being alert for the risks the colleagues are exposed to, and let me be taken care of. So the third one, accepting feedback, listening to what my colleagues say. As an employer, we have a huge responsibility in that area. So listen to what our employees have to say, gather their feedback, and act upon it. So this is very important. So not only listen, but just quick action on our side. Our employees, they guide us, they lead us, but we offer also solutions that matter to them, like free psychological help, webinars, workshops, on those topics that matter not only during the pandemic, but also outside of this topic, let's say. So this is what and like our employees said that already, like this is very important to them.
Thank you very much, Alicja. Katrin?
Yeah, thank you so much. I was just nodding when you said also being available for feedback. At Deutsche Telekom, we have just launched today our new diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. It's and that's followed by an impressive campaign called Connected as One, with a lot of pictures, with face mashups from employees. We're super excited about it. But what's also special is that the diversity team is now more represented as a team that you can contact, and also the whistleblowing tool is mentioned, so that it's also super clear what you can do if you don't feel safe, if something happened to you, if you don't have the luck to talk to your supervisor or to your team. I think that's especially important. And you can also do a lot to optimize those whistleblowing processes in terms of psychological safety. So making sure that people still sit in the driving seat, especially for the sensitive topics like discrimination or sexual harassment, consult them, advise them what to do, what would happen if they speak up. But also every leader can really create psychological safety in their team meetings, I would say, or even in the do fixes by starting sharing things as well. So, for example, when I started at Deutsche Telekom, we did things like my user manual, things you should know about me, things that are my red button. And I'm, for example, a late bird, and that's not so much common in the workplace, or at least we don't talk so much about it. And if I, for example, say, well, actually, if we meet at 8 or 9, that's really super hard for me, and I don't feel productive, that's for me at least a brave step, because it's might be seen as lazy, but it encourages others to say, well, okay, if we're starting it this way, then I can add something that's a red button for myself. And I've even shared some personal health related informations because I feel that's a door opener. So that's what managers can do. And of course, as HR or as the management, as the top leaders, you can encourage other leaders to do so. What I also like, for example, is creating things like cultural check-ins or spaces where it's not about the projects and the tasks, but it's really about the team, and about rather personal things. So where it's especially not about the work, because it's what I find important is that people who need space to talk about something don't have to create the space first, so that it's super clear where they would find the time. It's especially hard when you're under stress to ask in a very structured Scrum, retro, whatever meeting, sorry, and I would have here one last agenda item, any other business called, I have a depression. So if we don't have informal spaces already created, it's so much harder for people to speak up. So that's maybe my main point. Do you have spaces in your organization or meetings that allow people to speak up and without crashing the agenda?
Can I add
Thank
something
you very much.
Can I add something? First, Katrin, I want to tell you that there is a 30% of late birds. So I think that it's really good that you have mentioned about it, that there are these differences between people. I wanted just to give you very specific example in area of mental health, how we can, with good intentions, say something that will blame the employee when he exposed something sensitive. And it's very common that managers, I know that from my workshop, when we practice, we do role playing, how to talk with an employee with some kind of psychological crisis, that when people reveal the problem, the very first response of a certain manager is, oh, why haven't you told me that before? And it's a very blaming sentence. In fact, maybe not very, yeah, but it can cause some kind of discomfort, or someone can feel weak after hearing this sentence. So instead of saying, oh, I regret that you haven't told me that before, it's better to say, thank you for saying me this, thank you for your trust. So it's very tiny example of better communication that opens people and make them feel more secure. And second thing is that when we have competition in the company, all this, gamification and those competitions, who's the best, who's the master, it can also lower this security, because when we feel that we are compared to others, we are not so eager to open up with our faults and lower moods and etc. So I'm also sending this warning that we shouldn't create competitive cultures.
That's a super interesting point. May I add something to this? Because I think that's really interesting. Because I was about to add, I think what is helpful is also clear role expectations or clear rules or standards, because otherwise one could think, oh, psychological safety and no blame culture means, anything goes, right? We don't have any rules and we don't have any expectation, no performance management. And I think this is also not that would be also the far too too much on the other side. So somewhere in the middle, I think it also helps to be clear what is expected by everyone, and then around there you can find your own way, and you can be brave. But that's why I found it super interesting when you said no competition culture, because in my view, it can also help when expectations are clear and when there is a performance culture. But of course, the question is then, what exactly do we value, and what exactly do we recognize? Is it only if people, never share something, never goes something wrong, and they are just like machines doing something? Or is it really that we, as you just said, thank someone for sharing, thank someone for unpleasant feedback, for just being open. But I agree that it's an interesting point.
Thank you, Katrin. Małgorzata mentioned, well, both Katrin and Małgorzata mentioned late birds and people who prefer to work late into the night. Do I have your permission? Because Małgorzata, you also mentioned exposing something sensitive. So in the positive spirit, do I have your permission to expose something sensitive in this very conversation itself? And can I ask the studio now to show all of us?
Please do.
Do I have your... Yes, Alicja?
Of
Katrin?
course.
All right.
Sure.
Speaking of late birds, it's also sensitive that at conferences like this, when we have to discuss and review and share ideas in a remote reality, it's actually important that we use a little bit more light, Alicja, unless people will think that it's hello darkness, my old friend. So do I have your permission to write a formal letter to Volvo to buy a studio lamp or two for your purposes?
Yes,
that's
Yeah,
a joke.
it would be good. It would be good for her health.
Absolutely, and we will. And speaking of hello darkness, my old friend, we have 5 minutes left and less, and 5 questions from our audience. Wonderful questions, in fact. So allow me to read them in 2 chunks, and whoever wants to relate, please do. Tomasz is asking, who is or should be responsible for psychological safety in the workplace, not formally, but on the daily basis? So that's question 1. And then Emily. We say that psychological safety is about being able to bring your full self to work, but is that totally true? What if someone comes from a culture where they have been brought up to believe something that's totally opposed to a culture they've moved into? That is the role of women. So how do we address this? Is there a caveat to bringing your full self to work? Can we address these 2 first?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe I can answer those questions. Who is responsible? I would say everyone is responsible for this. Yeah. Obviously, at the beginning, when we recruit people, it's good to recruit people who are assertive and emotionally stable. So it's easier for them to be more bold when exposing, and people who are more emotionally stable, they don't also use judgment. So at the baseline, we have a team of people who are more prone to build psychological safety. But then on everyday basis, both sides, the person that is a whistleblower or wants to open up or say something, must have this boldness to talk about it. But on the other hand, there's a receiver that has to withdraw from judgment and be open and thanks for telling me this and etc. Yeah, so both sides, everyone is responsible. But talking about being totally true, I would not recommend to be totally yourself. I don't know what you're doing on the backstage at home when no one can see you. I wouldn't suggest to behave the same way at work, because we have some rules of conduct, obviously. But what is good for people, and I did a research and I use 1-item questionnaire, just evaluate the level of yourself feeling authentic at work. And when people feel that they can be in 70-80% their true self, it's enough for them. Yeah, so 20% you can hide, the rest it's good to show.
A quick comment to those 2 questions from anyone else?
Yeah, to the second one. So that's maybe related to clear expectations. So if a company has also a clear set of values and a clear policy or a code of ethics, whatever it is, and really stands behind those values, it's also clear that psychological safety and expressing your full self ends where you hurt others and where you limit others in their psychological safety. So that's for sure. Of course, that's the moment where then really some discussions need to take place, and somebody needs a bit more tough feedback. I mean, it's not limitless. It doesn't mean you can do whatever you want, no matter how others feel around you. I mean, it's the space that we shape around us, but we need to watch out for the space that others have around them.
Let me now give the choice to Alicja, because I know, Alicja, at Volvo, you're supporting a very broad mental health project, and I'm sure you already have conclusions coming out of that. So the 3 remaining questions from our chat, please feel free to choose at least one. One comes from Antoni. How can you recognize if your organization is psychologically safe, which is what you do, I would imagine, before implementing a program like yours? The other one comes from Sedana. We want people to have confidence and not worried about judgment. What if we clarify and talk about the need to take responsibility for the impact you have on others? And last but not least, Tomasz, how can I positively influence psychological safety? Some simple tips, perhaps, if there are simple tips and hacks. Alicja, your choice goes to.
So maybe the last question, those simple things. I mean, it comes down to the idea of leadership for me. Leadership is not about you; it's about people around you, but it starts with you. So we can all be leaders in our roles, even those that are not senior. In senior positions. So it's all about that. Those small little things are like choosing words and that are inclusive, that are not judgmental. So communication, basically, like it goes down to the communication, your style, communication style, the way how you communicate, how you embrace diversity and inclusion, how you treat people, yeah, I guess these are the basic things we all know, but sometimes we forget about them at work as well.
And the irony of the basic is that people very often overlook and underestimate the basic, the simple things that are at the foundations of the whole discussion. Anyone else would like to address any of the 3 questions? Which would be our closing remarks, by the way.
Oh God, no pressure. No, but something that I do is as a leader, as a manager, every jour fixe starts with the question, how are you? How are you personally? How are you in the role? And how are you related to me? Is there anything that we need to discuss in our relationship? And of course, the private topics are totally voluntary, but having them as the first agenda item and saying they always come first. So if there is anything to discuss, it comes before all the work-related topics. For me, at least, that's something that made a difference.
Thank you, Katrin. Małgorzata?
I would say in this, using those business terms, creating no-blame culture, creating a culture of good feedback, and helping people to develop positive self-esteem, because it's always a first step to be more brave, to talk about yourself, and also people with stable self-esteem, even if they are confident, they will not be overconfident and they will not harm others. So no blame, culture of feedback, and self-esteem, those 3 terms I would just leave at the end.
Thank you. Alicja, would you like to add anything as the closing remark, to be the last voice of our conversation? No pressure.
No pressure, no. I think, like we already mentioned, so many various things that matter, and yeah, just being mindful about the needs of my colleagues, my friends at work as well, and being mindful about the environment that I'm a part of, let's say.
Thank you. After all, I'm sure none of us want to build or contribute a work environment where one of the key things that employees do is await yet another context, yet another situation which is going to hurt you on a personal level. This is not what any organization wants, and we don't need to explain how closely it is linked to things like productivity, motivation, self-esteem. All of them absolutely critical for the success of your organizations. Małgorzata Wypych, CEO, Mental Health Center. Katrin Terwiel, Vice President, Diversity and Global Talent at Deutsche Telekom. Alicja Zarzycka, Employer Branding Country Manager, Volvo Group, Poland. Absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next up, we will talk about employee resource groups, and we had to pre-record this session, so enjoy.